A whirlwind of significant events has swept across the globe recently, reshaping political alliances and economic landscapes. From simmering tensions to landmark agreements, the world stage is in constant flux. Today, we delve into a critical development in the energy sector that carries profound implications for international trade and geopolitics. We're talking about Canada's monumental Trans Mountain pipeline expansion and the intricate web of interests involving the United States and China. Stay with us as we unpack this complex story, and remember, we'll be drawing key conclusions at the very end of this analysis. The world has seen numerous significant developments lately, and it's crucial to understand their interconnectedness. Amidst this backdrop, a major shift is occurring in the global energy market, centered around Canada's long-awaited, controversial, and incredibly expensive Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, known as TMX. This project, designed to transport vast quantities of Canadian crude oil from the landlocked heartlands of Alberta to the Pacific coast, promises to redraw energy maps. But its completion comes fraught with political tension, economic uncertainty, and a high-stakes game involving global superpowers. Understanding this situation requires looking back at the project's history and forward to its potential consequences. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support is vital for us to continue bringing you in-depth analysis like this. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global audience. The journey of the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion has been anything but smooth. Originally proposed decades ago, this colossal infrastructure project finally saw oil begin flowing in May of 2024, years behind its initial schedule, and costing an eye-watering 34 billion Canadian dollars, a staggering increase from the initial estimate of just 7.4 billion. The pipeline's primary objective is to break Canada's near-total reliance on the United States market for its oil exports. Historically, around 98% of Canada's crude exports were funneled south, often selling at a significant discount, sometimes as much as $15 per barrel, due to limited pipeline capacity and market access. The Canadian federal government, recognizing the strategic importance of diversifying its energy markets, took the extraordinary step of purchasing the existing pipeline and the expansion project from Kinder Morgan in 2018 for $4.5 billion. This decision aimed to ensure the project's completion, despite mounting opposition and financial hurdles, positioning TMX as a key artery to unlock access to the massive, energy-hungry markets across the Pacific, particularly in Asia. The potential economic boon for Canada is substantial, with government estimates suggesting a $20 billion annual boost. But the path to realizing this potential remains complex. Please make sure to watch this video until the end, as we will consolidate all these intricate details into clear conclusions. Just as the newly expanded Trans Mountain pipeline began its operations, promising a new era for Canadian energy exports, a significant political variable emerged south of the border. Former U.S. President Donald Trump, signaling his intentions for a potential return to the White House, revived threats of imposing hefty tariffs on Canadian goods. Specifically, he floated the idea of a 10% tariff on Canadian oil and gas imports. This wasn't an empty threat. During his previous term, Trump implemented tariffs on steel and aluminum, actions that strained relations with Ottawa. The Canadian Prime Minister at the time, Justin Trudeau, along with key figures like Mark Carney, though Carney was not PM, his influence in economic circles is notable, strongly opposed these measures, deeming them misguided and harmful to both economies. The prospect of renewed tariffs, particularly a 10% levy on vital energy exports, sent ripples of concern through Ottawa. Such a move could act like a guillotine, potentially slashing Canadian producer profits by an estimated $10 billion annually, according to the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. This threat underscored the vulnerability of Canada's dependence on the U.S. market and added immense urgency to the nation's efforts to diversify its export destinations, making the success of the TMX pipeline even more critical. The timing couldn't have been more charged, highlighting the volatile intersection of energy, economics, and international politics. Amidst the uncertainty created by potential U.S. tariffs and Canada's push for market diversification, Another global giant made a calculated and significant move. China, executing a strategy with the precision of a chess grandmaster, signaled its keen interest in Canadian crude. Rongsheng Petrochemical Company Limited, a major private refiner in China and a subsidiary of the vast Zhejiang Rongsheng Holding Group, quietly established a trading office in Calgary, the very heart of Alberta's oil industry. Rongsheng operates one of China's largest single-train refineries, boasting a massive appetite for heavy crude, processing capability nearing 800,000 barrels per day, precisely the type of oil extracted from Canada's oil sands. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. Rongsheng swiftly struck a multi-year crude oil supply deal with Suncor Energy, one of Canada's largest oil producers. This landmark agreement locks in shipments of 200,000 barrels per month, commencing in June 2025, flowing directly through the newly operational TMX pipeline from the West Ridge Marine Terminal in Burnaby, British Columbia, destined for Rongsheng's facilities in Jushan, China. This move is part of a broader Chinese strategy to secure long-term, diverse energy supplies, reducing reliance on volatile Middle Eastern sources amidst growing geopolitical instability. Rongsheng's North American debut, spearheaded by experienced oil trader Wang Jia, who previously built PetroChina's Canadian trading arm, represents a significant step in forging these new energy ties. The mechanics of the Rongsheng-Suncor deal reveal a sophisticated approach to navigating the global oil market. The contracts are structured on free-on-board (FOB) terms, a savvy strategy that grants Rongsheng ownership and control of the crude oil the moment it's loaded onto tankers at the Canadian port. This flexibility is crucial. It allows Rongsheng to potentially divert these massive shipments, transported on very large crude carriers, VLCCs, to other lucrative Asian markets like Japan or India if prices spike, potentially earning an extra $2 to $3 per barrel through arbitrage, according to S&P Global Analysis. Rongsheng isn't stopping with Suncor. Reports suggest the company is actively engaged in discussions with other major players in the Alberta oil sands, including Cenovus Energy, which produced around 800,000 barrels per day in 2024, Canadian Natural Resources Limited, and even global giants like BP and Shell, both of which hold significant stakes in Canadian oil sands operations. This flurry of activity indicates a determined effort by Rongsheng, operating through its subsidiary Aurora, to secure a substantial foothold in Canada's outbound crude flow. Industry insiders estimate Rongsheng aims to control roughly 10% of the TMX pipeline's total capacity by 2026, cementing China's role as a major new customer for Canadian oil and further facilitating Canada's strategic pivot away from the U.S. market. The Trans Mountain Expansion Project, the linchpin for this entire energy shift, stands as a testament to the challenges of building major infrastructure in the 21st century. Tripling the pipeline's capacity to a formidable 890,000 barrels per day, enough oil to fill 50 Olympic-sized swimming pools daily, was a monumental engineering feat. However, the project was plagued by over a decade of legal battles, regulatory hurdles, and ballooning costs that saw the final price tag soar to $34 billion from an initial $7.4 billion. Environmental groups fiercely opposed the expansion, raising alarms about increased tanker traffic in the ecologically sensitive Salish Sea and the inherent risks of oil spills devastating British Columbia's coastline. Indigenous groups, including the Squamish Nation and Tsleil-Waututh Nation, mounted significant legal challenges, arguing inadequate consultation regarding the pipeline's impact on their traditional territories and rights. These legal fights temporarily halted construction until a 2022 Supreme Court of Canada ruling allowed work to resume. While the Canadian government established a $1.5 billion spill response fund and touted enhanced safety measures for the modernized Westridge Marine Terminal and the 20 new storage tanks, concerns about environmental impact persist. The TMX saga underscores the complex balancing act between economic development, environmental protection, and Indigenous rights that defines modern energy projects. Canada's strategic energy realignment extends beyond just oil and the TMX pipeline. Natural gas, particularly liquefied natural gas, LNG, and hydropower, are also central to Ottawa's diversification efforts. The $40 billion LNG Canada project in Kitimat, British Columbia, led by a consortium including Shell, PetroChina, Kogas, and Mitsubishi, is nearing completion. Its first phase is set to begin shipping 14 million tons of LNG annually by late 2025, primarily targeting burgeoning demand in Japan and China, where gas consumption is rising 8% yearly, according to the International Energy Agency, IEA. Simultaneously, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre advocates for reviving the cancelled Energy East pipeline project to ship Alberta oil and gas eastward, supplying eastern Canada and potentially exporting LNG to Europe. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government, while facing criticism over Energy East's cancellation, is exploring other avenues, including potential Arctic LNG routes to reach markets like Germany, especially in light of Europe's urgent need to replace disrupted Russian gas supplies. Furthermore, Canada's substantial hydropower resources are already a significant export commodity. In 2024, utilities like Hydro-Quebec and Ontario Power Generation exported 42 terawatt-hours of clean electricity to the U.S., enough to power 4 million homes and generating $2 billion in revenue. These parallel developments in LNG and hydro, coupled with the government's $6.5 billion Global Markets Accelerator Plan, earmarking $5 billion specifically to help oil and gas exporters access new markets, paint a clear picture. Canada is actively leveraging its diverse energy portfolio to reduce its economic dependence on the United States and establish itself as a more flexible, multi-directional global energy supplier. The cumulative effect of these developments, the operational TMX pipeline carving a path to the Pacific, China's Rongsheng Petrochemical securing significant Canadian crude volumes, ongoing LNG projects targeting Asia and potentially Europe, and continued hydropower exports, signifies a profound shift in Canada's energy landscape and its relationship with the United States. For decades, the U.S. market consumed nearly all of Canada's 3.8 million barrels per day of oil exports, often at discounted prices due to Canada's captive market status. The TMX expansion fundamentally alters this dynamic, providing a vital outlet to Asia's $15 trillion energy market. This pivot is not just an economic strategy, it's increasingly a geopolitical necessity, amplified by the recurring threat of U.S. tariffs, particularly under a potential Trump administration. The U.S., reliant on its northern neighbor for 60% of its crude imports, around 3.9 million barrels daily, may soon face the consequences of this shift. U.S. refiners, especially on the Gulf Coast and in the Midwest, could see tighter margins as they are forced to replace readily available, discounted Canadian heavy crude with more expensive alternatives from Saudi Arabia or Venezuela, potentially driving up costs by $5 to $10 per barrel, according to Wood Mackenzie analysts. Goldman Sachs even predicts a potential 80 cents per gallon surge in American gas prices, a politically explosive prospect. Conversely, Asia, led by China, gains a stable, long-term energy partner in Canada. Despite ongoing diplomatic frictions over issues like Huawei and canola trade, oil remains a pragmatic lifeline, untouched by sanctions due to its vital importance. Canada is making a high-stakes bet on this strategic repositioning, transforming itself from a primarily U.S.-focused supplier into a diversified global energy player. Drawing conclusions from this intricate tapestry of energy projects, economic deals, and geopolitical maneuvering, several key points emerge. Firstly, the completion and operation of the $34 billion Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion marks a watershed moment for Canada, finally providing substantial access for its landlocked oil resources to lucrative Asian markets and fundamentally altering its decades-long energy export dependence on the United States. Secondly, China's strategic and timely entry into the Canadian market, exemplified by Rongsheng Petrochemical's multi-year deals and establishment of a Calgary hub, underscores Asia's growing energy appetite and China's objective to diversify its own sources away from the Middle East, positioning itself as a major new customer for Canadian crude. Thirdly, the persistent threat of U.S. tariffs, particularly the 10% levy on energy floated by Donald Trump, has acted as a catalyst, accelerating Canada's resolve to pivot its energy trade eastward and highlighting the potential economic and political risks for the U.S. if its primary crude supplier significantly diverts exports. Fourthly, Canada's energy strategy is multifaceted, involving not only oil via TMX, but also major LNG projects like LNG Canada aimed at Asia and potentially Europe, alongside significant hydropower exports, showcasing a deliberate national effort to become a more flexible and globally oriented energy powerhouse. Finally, this complex interplay is redrawing the North American and global energy maps, potentially leading to higher energy costs for U.S. consumers and refiners, while offering Canada new economic opportunities, albeit accompanied by significant environmental and political risks. Canada is undeniably in the midst of a dramatic energy transformation, a high-stakes recalibration of its place in the world, moving decisively beyond its traditional reliance on its southern neighbor. The long-term consequences of this pivot are still unfolding, but the direction of travel is clear. #Canada Energy, for TMX Pipeline, #Geopolitics. The Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion, TMX in Canada is operational after years of delays and massive cost overruns. 34B. This allows Canada to ship oil sands crude to Asia, reducing dependence on the U.S. market. China's Rongsheng Petrochemical has already signed deals to buy Canadian crude via TMX. This shift is amplified by potential U.S. tariffs threatened by Donald Trump, pushing Canada to diversify. Major LNG projects and hydropower exports further bolster Canada's strategy to become a global energy player, potentially impacting U.S. energy security and costs while creating new dynamics with Asian markets, especially China.